Every Saturday, Dad and I fixed his old truck in the driveway. We laughed, talked, and I always felt safe. One afternoon, I came home and he was gone. Then my sister started telling people things that never happened, and neighbors stopped talking. To me, sitting in Dad's empty chair, I felt more than just sad. I knew I had to fight to keep our real memories alive. Asterisk. I'm a 29-year-old woman born and raised in a small town in Oregon. My childhood was mostly quiet, just my mom, dad, and my younger sister, Lena. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom house at the edge of town, surrounded by woods and old neighbors who never moved. Life felt predictable in a good way until I turned 12. That's when our parents divorced. Mom moved to Seattle with Lena. I stayed with Dad. There wasn't a big custody fight or drama, just 2 kids split between 2 households and a whole lot of space growing between us. From that point on, I saw Lena mostly during holidays. Sometimes we'd have a weekend together, but it was rare. We became visitors in each other's lives. Dad and I, though, we got close. Not the loud, over-the-top kind of close, just steady. Every Saturday was project day, fixing the old truck. In the driveway, cleaning gutters, fishing at the reservoir when the weather held. He wasn't a big talker, but he always made space for me. He never missed a school concert or a parent-teacher night. Even when I knew it bored him to death, Lena changed a lot during those years. When she visited, she seemed like she couldn't wait to leave. She'd stay glued to her phone, roll her eyes at the town, and ask when we'd be done with whatever we were doing. Her bond with Dad got thinner every year. Mom remarried a few years after the divorce. Her new husband was in finance and had a high-rise condo with a view of the bay. They were into fine dining and destination holidays. I heard from Lena that she'd been enrolled in private school, got a new car at 17, and had her rent covered when she moved out for college. Meanwhile, I worked 2 part-time jobs and landed scholarships wherever I could. Dad pitched. And where he could, textbooks, dorm essentials, occasional grocery runs. He wasn't wealthy, but he never let me go without. I never resented Lena for the extra help she got. It just felt like 2 different lives running in parallel. I graduated with a degree in marketing, moved back home, and took a job at a small agency downtown. Weekends picked up where Dad and I left off, fixing up the garden, cooking together, watching old westerns. It was our rhythm. Lena only visited twice that year, once on Easter, then again for a rushed Thanksgiving dinner where she kept checking her watch. She didn't stay long either time. Then last summer, everything cracked open. I came home one Sunday afternoon from grocery shopping and found Dad in his recliner, eyes closed, no warning signs, no phone call, just a quiet house. A cold cup of coffee next to him and a bag of oranges in my hand that I never got to put away. The coroner said it was cardiac arrest. The days after were a blur. Calls, paperwork, funeral planning. I handled most of it. Lena flew in the next morning. She didn't ask about arrangements or help me sort anything. She walked into the house like she hadn't been away for years. I gave her space, but there wasn't much to say. Dad's will was straightforward. He left me the house and his truck, both things I'd been helping him maintain for years. Lena got a sizable sum of money and a few personal items, photos, jewelry that belonged to our grandmother, and a carved jewelry box from when she was little. There was no fighting over it during the reading, but her silence afterward was heavy. As soon as we left the attorney's office, she snapped, said the will was a joke and that it proved Dad never cared about her. That everything she got was a token. I tried to explain that it was fair, but she wouldn't hear it. She stormed out before I could finish. 2 days later, a second cousin I barely knew messaged me asking why I'd cut Lena out. Then a neighbor asked if I'd made Dad change his will recently. I was confused until I realized Lena was talking to people, telling a version of the story where I was the villain and she was the discarded daughter. I didn't respond to any of it. I just tried to get through the following weeks, but the noise didn't stop. People I'd known my whole life started treating me differently. Some avoided eye contact. Others asked vague, loaded questions about how close I'd been with Dad near the end. Meanwhile, I kept trying to hold on to what was left. I trimmed the hedges Dad used to fuss over. I rehung the porch light we never got around to fixing. I couldn't bring him back, but I could at least keep what mattered intact. I had just buried the one person in the family who saw me for who I was. And now Lena wasn't just grieving, she was rewriting everything he stood for, and worse, people were listening. A week after the funeral, I started getting strange texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. One asked if I'd really pushed Lena out of the house. Another hinted that Dad's will might have been changed under pressure. The messages came out of nowhere and all had the same undertone of accusation without actually saying it. At first, I thought it was just misunderstandings. But it kept happening. An old family friend called and asked if it was true that Dad had been struggling mentally before he passed. That one stopped me cold. Dad had been sharp as ever until the end, still working on house projects, still remembering the names of the neighbors' dogs. There was no sign of decline. I knew right away Lena was talking to people. I just hadn't realized how far it had already gone. I got clarity when my aunt called to check in and casually mentioned how unfortunate it was that Lena wasn't allowed to speak at the funeral. That didn't make sense. Lena had left right after the service. No one stopped her from doing anything. She barely spoke to anyone, didn't offer to help with arrangements, and didn't even bring flowers. But now the story was that I had banned her. I thought about confronting her once, but there was no point. It wouldn't have changed anything. I told her I knew what she'd been saying and asked why. She didn't deny it, just shrugged and said she was just being honest about how things felt to her. I didn't bother arguing. I assumed the rumors would fade after a while, but by Thanksgiving the damage was showing. Several relatives who used to come to our house every year suddenly had new plans. It turned out Lena had organized her own dinner in Seattle and invited the same people. Some of them had already RSVP'd to me. I didn't attend anything that year. It felt off, like there was a new version of the family taking shape and I wasn't part of it. I got a text from my cousin Ava a few days later. She admitted she'd gone to Lena's dinner. Lena told everyone I'd isolated her from Dad for years and manipulated the will to get the house. It became clear Lena wasn't just grieving, she was rewriting history. And what shocked me most wasn't her doing it. It was how many people seemed ready to believe her. People who had watched me spend every weekend with Dad, people who'd seen Lena breeze in and out of our lives without so much as a thank you. I stopped going to any family events after that, even the ones I used to love. At Christmas I dropped off gifts at the door and left before anyone could invite me in. I didn't want to play the part of the bitter sister, and I knew if I stayed, I'd either have to explain myself or sit in silence while people looked at me like I was something they couldn't figure out anymore. In December, I went to a small family gathering out of obligation. I barely stayed an hour. People nodded politely but didn't engage. No questions about work, no updates about kids, just small talk and tight smiles. A few days later, I learned Lena had emailed a memory list to extended family, stories about Dad supposedly from her childhood. I got my hands on a copy. Most of it was exaggerated, some completely made up. She'd written about how Dad taught her to drive, he didn't, and how they used to go to the movies every weekend never happened. But it was polished and emotional and just believable enough for people to cling to. I didn't challenge it, I didn't reply. Instead, I made a quiet visit to the park where Dad's memorial bench had been installed. I brought a small wreath, sat down and noticed something missing, the nameplate, his name, the year he passed, and a short quote he loved. Gone. I checked with the park's office the next day. They hadn't removed it. No one had reported damage or vandalism. It wasn't an accident. There were no witnesses, no proof, just a blank space where something meaningful had been, and no one taking responsibility for it. I didn't accuse Lena. I didn't need to. The timing said enough. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about grief, not for her. It was about narrative. She couldn't undo the past, but she could paint a version that suited her. And once that version started spreading, it didn't matter what was true. It only mattered who was louder, and she had made sure I was the one staying quiet. I didn't argue with anyone. I stopped replying to the whispers and calls. I just focused on the house, painted the fence, cleared out the shed, and trimmed the giant elm tree that dropped leaves like clockwork every fall. Slowly, I turned the place into something Dad would have been proud of, not fancy. Just clean, open, peaceful. By early spring, his old friends started coming around, some from his trucking days, others from the diner where he used to eat breakfast. They'd show up on Saturdays with ribs, potato salad, and old speakers blasting country songs from the 80s. They brought folding chairs and coolers and sat out back telling stories I'd never heard before. One of them remembered the time Dad pulled a guy's broken-down rig through 4 towns just so he could make it home for Christmas. Someone else brought a framed photo of Dad at a truck stop in Idaho, standing beside a wreck he'd helped clear during a snowstorm. No speeches, no drama, just memories that felt real. Then I heard from a neighbor that Lena had been asking around, telling someone I was throwing parties in her childhood home. She hadn't lived there since she was maybe 8, but now it was sacred ground, apparently. A week later, I got a letter from a law office in Seattle. It wasn't a lawsuit, just a formal request to reconsider the division of estate assets. citing emotional distress and a desire for a more equitable outcome. It read like something pulled from a template. I sent it straight to my attorney. Dad's will had been done, properly witnessed, notarized, updated just 6 months before he passed. There was no loophole, no ambiguity. But that letter still did what it was meant to, sow doubt. A few relatives who had stayed quiet started asking questions again. I made a choice. I took the will, highlighted the relevant sections, and sent it privately to the few people still circling in the middle. One added notes, dates, bank records, witness names, just the facts. Some responded with short apologies. Others didn't say anything at all. Most of them backed away, not wanting to get caught between us. I didn't blame them, but I wasn't about to let Lena twist the truth any further. That's when I heard she'd started hosting dinners of her own. Tribute meals, she called them. Invitations went out to family, friends, even a few people from Mom's neighborhood. She claimed to be cooking Dad's favorite recipes, things she had never once made with him. Dad did all his cooking on Saturdays, usually in silence, with a worn-out apron that read, "Trust the cast iron," across the front. Lena never helped him once, but she didn't stop there. At one of her dinners, she told the guests she'd found a handwritten recipe journal Dad had left behind, and that she planned to turn it into a small cookbook to honor him. I knew immediately it wasn't true. Dad never kept a journal. His recipes were on sticky notes, backs of receipts, and folded napkins stuffed into the second drawer of the kitchen cabinet. I had them all, so I went through everything, sorted and scanned them, made clean copies, and stored the originals in plastic sleeves labeled by dish. I printed out the scans, added notes about origin and age, just in case she pushed the lie. Further, that weekend, I drove to Seattle without telling anyone. I found the address through a cousin who'd forwarded the invite. It was a small backyard gathering, tables with candles, soft music playing, framed photos of Dad set up along the fence. I waited until after everyone had eaten. Lena stood at the head of the table talking about how much Dad loved family meals. I walked up, placed a small folder on the table, and stepped back. Inside was one of his actual recipes, his smoked brisket rub, written in blue ink on a diner napkin, grease-stained and unmistakably real. I'd sealed it in clear plastic with the diner logo still visible. She froze. A few people looked at her, then at me, then at the folder. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out. I heard chairs shifting and someone clearing their throat, but mostly it was quiet. Later that night, I got a text from Eva, just a photo of the sealed recipe next to a sunflower centerpiece. No one followed me out. No one came after me. I didn't need to explain anything. The truth had spoken for itself. After the recipe incident, I thought Lena might back off, but instead she showed up 3 days later, no call, no warning, parked across the street, stood on the lawn and filmed the house. Porch windows, mailbox, no knocking, no questions, just slow, deliberate recording like she was gathering evidence. I didn't go outside. They left after about 10 minutes. When I checked the mailbox that evening, I found a folded piece of paper tucked behind it. The handwriting was hers. It said, "This was my home first." The next morning, I went down to the sheriff's department and filed a report. I didn't press charges, just wanted it documented. They made a note, gave me a case number, and that was that. A few days later, a package arrived addressed to Dad. Inside were things from Lena's childhood, a faded photo of her in a Halloween costume, an old hair ribbon, and a small toy truck with a missing wheel. No explanation, just a sticky note reading, "Since you like memories so much." I boxed it up and sent it back to her place with delivery confirmation. And that was the end of it. That same week, I replaced the locks on all the doors, had new deadbolts installed front and back, and put in a camera system around the house, one over the driveway, one on the porch, one in the backyard. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to dot at a cousin's baby shower the following weekend. Lena showed up wearing one of Dad's old flannel jackets, unmistakable blue and gray with a small rip near the cuff. I remember donating that jacket to a thrift store too. Town's over when I cleared out the closets. I checked the tag when she wasn't looking. The thrift store label was still sewn inside. She told people it had been gifted to her in private before Dad passed, but one relative quietly pointed out the label. A few nodded as if they believed her. I didn't say a word. I left after 30 minutes, not wanting to stay for the show. Later, I heard Lena was telling everyone I'd stormed out because I was jealous. That night I pulled the attic ladder down and went through everything. Old boxes, dusty bins I hadn't opened since I was a teenager. I sorted through it all, pulled Out anything tied to dad letters, old uniforms, photo albums, the tools he never got around to labeling. I boxed them, labeled them, and stored them in a locked cabinet where only I had the key near the bottom of one crate. I found something I hadn't seen before, a sealed envelope, yellowed at the edges, with Lena's name written neatly on the front in Dad's handwriting. I opened it once. It wasn't long, just a few paragraphs. He'd written that he wished they'd stayed close, that he didn't know how to reach her anymore, that he was proud of what she could become but disappointed in how far she drifted. I made digital copies, then resealed the envelope. I wasn't going to throw it at her or use it in a fight, but it made things clearer. Lena wasn't chasing memories, she was rewriting them to suit herself. By early spring, Lena mailed out what she called a family preservation statement, designed like a formal document. It asked extended relatives to support turning Dad's house into a shared family memorial space. There was no mention of legal transfer, just a long emotional plea followed by signature lines. Most people ignored it. A few signed just to avoid drama. I invited Uncle Ray, Dad's older brother, who'd sat beside Dad and the attorney during the will, signing out for a weekend. He'd witnessed every initial and every page explanation. Ray wasn't dramatic. He just told people the truth. Dad was calm, clear, and made the choices he wanted. Of course, Lena pushed back again, saying Ray was old and confused. I didn't respond. I just invited Ray and a few of Dad's old Navy friends to dinner at the house. We grilled steaks, played cards, and passed around photos from their boot camp days. Before Ray left, he handed me a leather-bound photo album that Dad had given him for safekeeping. Inside were dozens of pictures of me and Dad, working on the truck, camping trips, birthdays, holidays. Lena was there only in the early ones. Ray said the last batch of photos had been sent to him when Lena stopped returning calls. I scanned every page, saved copies in multiple places, and tucked the originals into a fireproof box. That same month, our grandmother turned 80. We held a dinner at a community hall. Lena showed up wearing pearls and a pressed navy dress. Toward the end, she tapped a fork against her glass and gave a speech about healing the rift, choosing peace over ego, and honoring Dad through unity, each line delivered with a glance in my direction. I smiled, clapped, and moved on. The applause was polite and brief. No one followed up afterward. 2 days later, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a framed photo of Lena and Dad when she was about 6, with a note on the back reading, "He remembered me once." I slid the frame into a padded envelope and mailed it back with no return message. I wasn't collecting proof. I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted to be done. That moment made it clear this wasn't about memories or a house anymore. Lena was trying to stay part of a story she'd long stopped participating in. Relevance was all she had left. Control. That summer, I finally started the project Dad and I had planned for years but never finished, restoring his old 1972 Ford pickup. It had sat under the carport since I was in high school, engine rusting, upholstery torn, frame sagging. A mechanic friend helped with the frame and engine. I tackled the interior at night, stripping panels, polishing metal, and installing custom leather seats just as Dad had bookmarked years ago. Neighbors stopped by with snacks and stories. How Dad pulled cars out of ditches, always kept extra jumper cables in the back. Word spread fast. By mid-July, Lena somehow found out. The garage got a call asking for an inspection report on her father's vehicle. My friend declined. 2 days later, she called the local parts supplier asking if I was illegally profiting from the restoration. That was the last straw. I placed all my parts orders under my friend's name to avoid the constant monitoring. Meanwhile, rumors kept coming. Lena's boyfriend moved out quietly, telling mutual friends she had become obsessed with correcting the family narrative, rewriting photo captions, and telling anyone who'd listen that history had been stolen. From her, one evening, Ava showed up at the garage. She'd been distant for months, but now admitted she'd made a mistake siding with Lena. She hinted Lena was planning a big legacy announcement at her upcoming birthday dinner. Ava left quietly. I didn't ask for details. After weeks of work, the truck looked like the photos, metallic blue with chrome trim, white wall tires, and those custom mud flaps Dad joked about ordering in 2005. The dashboard was clean. The engine purred and the bench seat looked brand new. For the first time in a long while, the house felt like it was moving forward. Lena's birthday dinner came a week later at a local hotel banquet room, string quartet, printed programs, the whole show. I didn't attend, but the next morning, my inbox lit up. During her speech, she announced a scholarship in Dad's name at the university she attended. What she omitted was that she'd submitted a fabricated biography claims that Dad studied there, earned certificates, and supported their programs. The alumni office reached out to me. The documents she submitted mixed facts with fiction. I provided real documents, his high school diploma, tax filings, employment records, and the proposal was quietly withdrawn within a week. Donors and attendees soon learned the truth. Ava texted 2 words, "It's over," and in a way it was. That scholarship lie was the last card Lena had to play. Legacy doesn't come from speeches or printed programs. It comes from the hours people put in and from what they remember when no one's watching. Every lie she told made it easier for people to remember who he really was, and who had actually shown up all these years. After the scholarship incident, Lena went silent. No calls, no emails, no family gatherings. A full month passed without a peep. Meanwhile, I finished the truck and, on the anniversary of Dad's death, took it out to the lakeside cabin he used to rent. I parked under the pines, rolled the windows down, and sat in silence. In the glove compartment, I left a photo of the 2 of us, me on his shoulders, both sunburned and grinning next to his old laminated fishing license. I didn't take it back. When I got home, Aunt Marion called inviting both me and Lena to a family lunch. I agreed. Lena didn't show. Marion told me Lena had moved back in with Mom and started working part-time at a nonprofit. She was laying low now. A few days later, a certified letter arrived. Lena requested a review of any belongings she might have left in Dad's attic. The attic had been cleared months ago, but I had everything cataloged, dated, and notarized. I sent her a detailed inventory proving nothing remained. She didn't respond, and slowly her name stopped coming up. Her version of things stopped spreading. By early fall, I hosted a quiet dinner at Dad's house, just Uncle Ray, Ava, and 2 of Dad's oldest friends with their wives. We grilled steaks, played his favorite records, and shared stories. Midway through, Ava looked around and said, "He would have loved this. Just good people, no show, no noise. Nobody added to it, nobody had to." And trying to claim his legacy, Lena had written herself out of the one that truly mattered, the one that lived. Thanks for hearing my story. In the end, it wasn't fancy dinners or loud speeches that proved my dad's legacy. It was the quiet Saturdays we spent together and the real memories that survived every lie. If you've ever felt silenced by someone else's version of the truth, remember, the strongest legacy lives on in the moments we keep when no one's watching.